Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Discussion Podcast. I have a special guest with me today, Mr. Cravens. I call him Rick. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. How you doing, Sam?
I'm doing blessed, man. I really appreciate you, man. So 26 years U.S. Air Force, primarily as a security forces, and then after that transitioning into contracting on the state side. And now you're making other big bucks over there on the federal side, the VA. I mean, Rick, you got to give me some money, man. I need something, you know.
Hey, big bucks is relative. 'Cause when I think of big bucks and what I'm getting paid, ain't the same.
Oh man, I appreciate you, man. I just wanted to say, man, thank you, man. I've seen you firsthand, in terms of what you do currently at the VA. I know you're not speaking on behalf of the VA today, but I wanted to thank you. What I've learned so far about the VA overall, but just the veteran benefit and administration of how the VA operate, I learned that from you. I want to say thanks for all your coaching, guiding, and overall as far as the time you take to invest in me. It means a lot to me. I didn't express that, a lot of time, but I wanted to thank you for the path you created for me and
Not a
help
problem.
me enough to know just enough to be dangerous, I guess. You know what I'm saying? So I appreciate you.
That's all us. As you already know, when you mentoring someone, you are being mentored yourself because everybody learns different and is figuring out what motivates that other individual. So there's always challenges.
I appreciate you, brother. So for 26 years, you was Air Force. When I first created this platform, really, my target was just Army guys. But I'm a little bit biased. But for you, because you were Air Force guy, it's going to be somewhat of an exception for you, Rick. So don't get too comfortable over here, man. This is the Army platform. It's not Air Force guys and stuff. So
Not a problem. Whenever there's a war, y'all needed a ride. We was happy to help.
I think you gotta say that. I appreciate you, man. So 26 years, U.S. Air Force from Chicago. What? So how did it all get started, Rick? You from Chicago. You could doing something else, but you decided to join the Air Force and serve your country. So how if you can give us a little background, what Mr. Craven decided what to serve?
If you would have told me a year before or even 6 months before I joined the service that I'll be joining, I would have told you were crazy. Graduated high school, went on to a small school, trying to play football. Everybody has big dreams of going pro. So was mine.
Mm-hmm.
So, while in school, I was recruited as a wide receiver. Got there, he said, "Hey, we want you to play cornerback." I said, "Coach, I'm a receiver." We went back and forth, and I said, "Coach, a cornerback is a receiver that can't catch." He said, "Yeah, get
Tell
on
me
over
about
there." So,
it.
you know, so that kind of molded and changes my view on what college was going to be. But, still try to make the best of it. End up tearing up my knee. Uh, Scholarship still remained in place, but the benefits, not that we had NIL deals, but the benefits of, hey, you're staying in these dorms, talk to this person about a car, talk to this person about insurance, all that has changed. So my parents came in and said, hey, not a problem. We'll take care of all those other things and stay in school. And I said, okay, I'm thinking about that. Then I asked the question, if I do that, I got to abide by your rules? And they said, yeah, certainly. I said,
Yeah.
okay, Uncle Sam, here I come. So,
Oh
not
man.
that was a bad decision, and I love my parents. I love them deeply. Um, but I think my parents made life difficult for a reason, to motivate you to go on and do something more.
Yeah.
And so kind of that's what they did. And the Air Force gave me that opportunity. Ideally, we all sign up, say, hey, I'm going to do 2, 3, 4 years. I'm not staying around. Them dudes are lifers and so forth and so on. And as time goes on and progresses, you look back over that career and realize that, it's changed you and hopefully for the better.
Yeah.
So that's how I
Man,
got
that's
started.
amazing. So when you first joined the Air Force, or prior to joining the Air Force, you had any preconceived notion around any kind of expectations? Because all 6 branches are completely different. Because for us, the Army guys, we do believe the Air Force always have the good assignment, good deployment places. The jobs are pretty well. So do you have any expectation going to the Air Force? And when you got there, was it what you expected?
It was nothing like I expected. I had no real true concept of what the military was going to be. First I tried to join the Army. but the Army couldn't get me in time. And like I told you, hey, I couldn't live by my parents' rules. So the Air Force recruiter said, hey, good to go. We'll take you. We got a spot for you. And better yet, your buddy over there, he can come too. So that's
Mm.
how I started. And so my whole vision was based off of old TV shows like MASH. Okay, I'm
Uh-oh.
be a security policeman. I'm be riding around in a Jeep, and Rambo had just came out, and I said, hey, I want to do that. What's the closest thing you got to being Rambo? He said, hey, well, we got security forces for you. Two
Uh-oh.
sides. You got law enforcement and security. I said, law enforcement. Oh, that's just writing tickets, standing on the gate. Now you want to be security. You want to fire the M16, the 203, the 141. The, from back in my day, it was still the M60 where you had to change the barrel. I said, okay,
Yeah.
that's what I want to do. Little did I know I would be walking around the aircraft and missile silos, but you know, it
That's
builds character.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, the Air Force is very unique, right? I had some friends of mine who served in the Air Force when I was back at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. I think we were close to was it Arthur's Air Force Base? I think it's one of
Oh,
them. And
yeah.
one is in Wichita Falls as well. So we used to go out and hang
Shepperton,
out.
Wichita Falls.
Shepherd. Yep.
Altus is Oklahoma. I want to say Lawton.
Oklahoma, yeah. Yeah, it's not too far from London. Yeah, not too far from
Yep.
London. So in terms of your service in the Air Force, I know you went through different duty stations and different assignments, different leadership as far as positions so far. What are some things that shape you as a leader? Because I know when you transition, we're going to get there so far at the highest as far as non-commissioned officer level. What were some things really that shaped you initially to say, this is my leadership philosophy. This is what I'm going to focus on. This is who I want myself to be. Who were some folks that overall impacted you?
Probably the person that has the biggest impact to me was a Master Sergeant Robert Wicks. Him and Greg Pleasant. Uh, what was Head and Master Sergeant Head and Smith. I can't remember their first names.
Mm.
They were very impactful in my career. I'm not the textbook person that comes in and stays in the service and grows into leadership. I was that guy that was kicking and screaming, trying to go the other way. So they invested in me. And they saw something in me. And so as security forces, we had guard mount every day where you have
Yeah.
the briefings, everybody get together, you inspect the uniforms, go clear, going through the weapons, and then go. I was always upset. Why do I always have to do the briefing? We got 6 or 7 other guys that's senior to me or other folks that's junior to me that can be doing these briefings. But they kept me doing the briefings, and as time went on, as far as Air Force promotion, a big portion of that is testing.
Yeah.
But by doing those briefings, it instilled and reinforced all the things that I needed to know for testing. So it made testing easy. So they were teaching me, and I didn't know I was being taught. So that was the big portion for the beginnings of my promotion. Then from there, at one time I was the NCOIC of the gate section. When you come through the gate, you wave traffic
Yeah.
through, salute the officers, so forth and so on. So it was me and another guy. His name was Clausen, Kelly Clausen. So we were same rank, but uh, I was the ranking person by a couple of months. He had just came back from testing, kicked his feet, came in my office, kicked his feet up. I pushed his feet off my desk. He was like, "Yep, I made it. I'm getting promoted. The test was
Yeah.
easy." He said, "When do you test?" I said, "I test next week." He said, "Yep. You been studying?" I said, "No, I hadn't." And he said, "Well, I'm gonna be your supervisor." This
Uh-oh.
dude was a complete jerk. And that was my motivation for the next strike. I said, this dude can't be my supervisor. So every day, and I guess I was either lucky or or real lucky. Went home, studied a couple hours a day for a week or so, went in and scored well. We both made it that year, so I maintained the advantage in the promotion, still being his supervisor. So,
That's
and
pretty cool. I think the Air Force is a little bit different from the Army in terms of promotion. I believe the Air Force did take tests, I think, right, for your next promotion. When does that start? Is it at what rank? Is it from specialist to a sergeant, or where is it at every rank you have to take a test, like an assessment for promotion?
It'll be the equivalent from specialist to sergeant. For us, it
Oh,
was
okay.
senior airman, which is the equivalent of specialist E4, to going to a staff sergeant, which is our E5. From there, going up. So it consists of testing. Of course, your PT score goes into it. That's minimal, and boards. You know.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's pretty straightforward for us. We have just the boards and then just promotion points and stuff like that that some way accumulate. And then as you appear to the E5 board, it's a point system. I think it still remains the same, I believe. I mean, I transitioned 3 years ago. But as you just want to explore your career just a little bit more, as you transition through the ranks, what are some obstacles you think you face as a leader, right? Because the Air Force, the Army, every branch of the service is very diverse. Folks from different walks of life and different places have different belief system, whatever. We're all wearing the same uniform. For the Army, we have the Army value, but we still have folks with their core belief. What were some obstacles you faced as a leader? You believe that you handle well, or you say, I wish I would have done this differently.
It's quite a bit I wish I would have done differently. Um, you know, we're a product of a society. Everybody
Yeah,
thinks the military is the elite of the elite, but we're a percentage of our society. Roughly, Black Americans make up roughly 14% of society, which is the same equivalent number in the services, or at least for the Air Force. So you run into a lot of obstacles based off of race,
yeah,
where some folks could get away with certain things you couldn't, or even in, certain presentations throughout different schools, people would say, "Oh, I didn't know you're pretty smart," or uh,
mm,
"You speak well," and so finding ways to deal with that correctly, because sometimes I didn't. Sometimes I snapped off, and then they, it gave them what they were looking for. Oh, yeah, that's the
yeah,
guy that I was
yeah.
looking for. So learning to adapt. And to me, I think that's the big thing about the military. As long as you can learn to adapt, that flexibility, and keep what's important to you as far as what's in your core values. So, our parents all raised us to be respectful and hopefully do the right thing. Most people don't want to do a bad job, and they truly want to do a good job. So pushing yourself to do that. I think one of the things that drove me even farther was that racism, because people expected me to do poorly. They didn't
Mm.
expect me to excel. And so once that became my driving force to prove others wrong.
That's crazy,
Yeah.
right? Because sometimes stereotype does exist, right? I mean, he's from
Mhm.
Chicago. So the moment you hear Chicago, one of those major cities, folks started thinking something different, right? It's crazy to know how thing works. What would you say to a young Rick, that is out there today who's joining the Air Force? I mean, things have changed since you and I transitioned, right? But the core belief, I mean, the core as far as standard still remains the same in the branch of the service. What are
Correct.
some advice you can give a young Rick or young Sam, coming to the Air Force in terms of, hey man, I would recommend you don't do X, Y, Z. I recommend you do this to be successful.
Uh, I would go back and tell a young Rick, you heard the saying, look before you leap, think before you act. To some of the things where I acted off of emotion, uh,
Hmm.
and it was a reaction versus digesting what was said, taking a few moments to think about it, then move forward from there. Uh, I had some hurdles in my career. Most people go from E1 to E2 to E3 and gradually promote. I went from E1 to E2, back to E1 to E2 to E3 to E4, back to E3, and gradually came on through. So, uh,
Uh,
looking back on that, and I wouldn't change a lot of it because it made me who I am today. And
yeah,
sometimes you have to learn from those hard lessons. A lot of times you can tell a child that the stove is hot, the stove is hot. But after you touch it one or two times, some of us take a little longer, you realize that it's hot. But it helped me formulate my opinions on how to navigate the military world once I decided, hey, this is where I'm gonna be.
A friend of mine who I'm trying to get on the show, man. He has a different experience within the army, right? As you just stated, right? You went from E1 to E2 back to E1, E2. Went through some things, whatever the case may be, and I think that to some extent, right, shape you for who you are, in my opinion. And for me,
Correct.
when I was serving, I always believe in giving folks a second chance. Just it all depends on what the infraction is, really. Some things, okay, we can give him or her the chance. Because I think somebody saw something in you and said, "Hey, I do believe he's off the reservation right about now, but hopefully, we can bring him back on track with some assistance, whatever the case may be." And I do believe the military has a lot of different tools in place to help young soldiers. Because it's difficult though, if you think about it, right? Leaving home for the first time, joining the military, away from family members, trying to figure out what's going on. But you're trying to learn yourself, really. And sometimes, as you stated, sometimes folks can get out of pocket. You got to check them once in a while, but also there's rules and regulations you have to follow. So it's a very very thin line to overall navigate. But I do believe the service. I tell anybody so far, I think the service is structured to where to make you successful, really. But nobody's perfect.
Correct.
Nobody's overall perfect. I think somebody saw something in you and so so we're gonna go ahead and open invest into Rick. I do believe he's having some issues now, but hopefully he can get back on track. 26 years. You do your time, different duty station, different assignment, different leadership position, serving different capacity, and then you had to determine trying to overall the transition so far. What was that like, really, in terms of when you decide it's time for me to transition? Is it something you plan ahead of schedule, or something that happens sporadically?
It just kind of happened for me,
Okay,
as going through the ranks, you never think you're going to reach that point. It's one day at a time. Who can I help? What can I do to make this environment better for the next person to come along? Uh, the next thing you know, um, I'd been at Shaw for a couple of years, and I was presented with an assignment. The same thing that I used to tell troops before. Hey, you want to try to align your goals with what the Air Force needs are. Keeping in mind that the Air Force needs come first. So if the Air Force needs for you to go to Japan or Korea, that's where the needs exist. And that's where we need for you to go. So it was at that time the Air Force felt that I was better needed overseas. So I had a choice between Turkey, Hawaii, or going to DC. All
it's a good
great
assignments, Rick.
assignments.
It's a good assignments.
I was recently divorced. My son was a senior in high school, and
Mm,
those were very informative and developmental years of a black young man. So I
yeah,
wanted to be there
yeah.
for that. Um, the Air Force didn't have any programs to keep me in place, so at that time it was time for me to transition.
Man,
So
that's crazy, right? That's one area we don't talk about that
no,
often, right? As far as the military family, in terms
r-
of the constant PCS move, the constant, deployment, rotation, different places and stuff. If I just want to go back just a little bit, if you don't mind, just to talk about, the family piece, because how were you able to balance that? Because a lot of folks struggle with that, right? You in the service, you're married, you have children, the possibility of PCS and getting deployed. How were you able to balance that in terms of why you were still in uniform?
uh, during that time frame, I had a great wife. The unfortunate thing is, I didn't realize that then. She was
Gotcha.
also in the military, and so we end up getting joint assignments. So when I PCS, she PCS, and vice versa.
That's nice.
The issue becomes you serve in your own capacity. So when it's time for her to deploy, she had to deploy, and then
Yeah.
when it's time for me to deploy, I had to deploy. Um, so it was quite a few years of us high five and
Mm,
saying drop, take the kids and being out. Uh, Twofold, that has its pros and its cons. So when she was home or when I was home, things that would have normally pissed me off was, well, we're gonna let that slide because we
yeah.
know a deployment's coming soon. But when you're doing that for 8 9 years and you spend 18 months and 8 or 9 years, you kind of
Mm,
drift apart.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
you know that was the glue and the division of our
I
marriage.
got you though. Yeah, I give military as far as family huge level of respect. Just not saying folks who's outside the military don't have things to test with, but like you said, right, the possibility you going places and leaving the family all by themselves, and you going different places, doing different things, it can take a toll on the family. It can take a lot. And of course, the Army have, well, I speak for the Army, I believe the military have system in place and different things and counseling, whatever. But at the end of the day, it's just a lot. No matter who you are, it is a lot.
Correct. It's like everything in life. When you bought your car, it came with an owner's manual.
Yeah,
When you start setting up this podcast, it came with some instructions and some directions. When you had kids and got married, it was none of that. So you
yeah,
kind of learn from your experiences, good and bad. So what you saw your parents do as far as in their marriage, or you saw how your parents dealt with you as a child or your siblings, is kind of what you adapted. Some of it, worked better than others. Some of it, you said, no, I'm not going to do that. And you came up with your own blended or balanced way to make that happen. But it molded all of us. I do agree with you as far as the service. Uh, it makes you have a greater appreciation for a lot of different things. When you miss those birthdays or those
yeah.
Christmas or those first steps or first words, so it it makes you try to hold on or appreciate all of that even a little more.
Absolutely, absolutely. So you were given couple wonderful assignments, and you decided, I'm going to transition. During your transition process, did you have any idea in terms of what you're going to do, right? Because a lot of folks struggle when it comes to transition because you've been doing something for over 20 something, 25, 26 years. Now you have to pivot. You were in a very new operation environment. What was it like for you in terms of trying to figure out exactly who you are? What's your purpose? What are you trying to do outside the military?
His background, and I had acquisitions. I had a degree in acquisitions. In my mind, I'm the perfect candidate for
Yeah,
anybody. Being on a base or a post is like being in the city itself. So
yeah,
you see all those different aspects as you climb that ladder. What is civil engineering doing? What does that take to get done? What is personnel doing? What does that do? So I feel that, hey, I'm the perfect person for your job. Uh, Unfortunately, the civilian world doesn't always see it that way. They may see that, hey, you have some experience, you have the education, but I have this new, but you have an expectation of getting this for pay. You want champagne taste, but they have a beer budget. So
mhm.
for a lot of companies, it's easier for them to go out and get a college student who has, somewhat of the book sense and mold them into what they want. Whereas you
Yeah,
already kind of developed your opinions, your mindset, and your values, and it's a little difficult. Uh, so I had some job offers. They weren't what I thought they should be. So over time, I kind of settled and transitioned and went to work for the state for a moment, for a brief time, in acquisitions. Uh, they called and said, hey, based off your records, so forth and so on, we got, we normally don't do this, and this is what we can do offer you. This is more than anybody else gets coming out of the gate, so forth and so on. So they said 38,000. I said, what? You said $38 an hour? Yeah, no, 38,000,
Oh, no.
38,000 every 3 months. No, yearly.
Yeah, yeah.
So, talking with the family, say, hey, well, you got to start somewhere. You need to get the experience of being in the workforce. It's different from the military. Um, and plus, you got a retirement check coming in. Do you
Mhm.
really need to make that much? So, okay, so uh, went in there, did that for a minute. The outgoing guy, he was like, "Man, I never seen him offer anybody that much." And he retired after 20 some years with the state at like 42, 44,000.
Mhm.
So I knew that wasn't for me. I would have to quickly pivot or exit that. But while I was there, hopefully it made a difference for somebody, and it
Yeah,
gave me some experience. Left there, came to the VA and been with the VA for since 2014. So
right.
the last 11 years. Um, So for most folks, have a plan, set expectations, but those expectations need to be realistic. So sometimes they may
Realistic, yeah.
have to be tempered. I'm not saying be complacent and settle for anything. So know your worth, but you have to be flexible in order to move on. You know, in the Air Force, we used to get quite a few young lieutenants that came out and they have the education, but they don't have the experience. So typically, you try to pair them with a senior NCO to kind of lead them and guide and bring them along their way. Uh, I say that to say a lot of folks leaving the military are like those young lieutenants. We think we're here, and sometimes we got to be brought down
Yeah.
a little bit to realize what we don't know. So,
You have to be humble because you operate in a wholly different environment for which you're not familiar with. And sometimes a lot of us struggle as we transition. So I put transition in so many different categories, right? In terms of different buckets, if you want to use that terminology, right? You have the physical transition, meaning you as a person, 20 something, 28 years, you transition, you, your family, and everything else. But there's also a mental part of it because now you just left a job in terms of the service for where on the first and 15 the paycheck is coming in. You're not going to get
right,
fired unless you do something completely out of control, which is more on ethical. There's a level of stress that comes along with it mentally in terms of, man, I'm about to transition now. I want to make sure I make this amount of money to make sure I maintain my cost of living or just my lifestyle. When you
correct.
transition, was there any mental part of it in terms of the stress level, and how we able to balance that? I tell folks, no matter who you are, when you transition, you will experience something I call post transitional PTSD. It's going to happen because now you're in a whole new different environment. I experienced that. A lot of folks who I spoke to, they experienced that. Did you experience anything like that as far as just not being afraid, but just not knowing what to expect, and the level of stress that comes along with it? And if so, how were you able to manage that as well?
Right. It's the unknown. It's the uncertainty. It's anxiety, if you will.
Yeah.
You come from something that's structured. Uh, when you got up, you knew what you were wearing every day. You were putting on
Hmm.
that uniform. You knew what time you had to be at, you know, job
Yeah.
or PT or any type of movement. With that transition into the civilian world, all of that kind of changed. You know, when you went to work, you called, hey, Colonel so and so, hey, uh, Sergeant Major so and so, hey, Sergeant so and so. Coming into the civilian sector, everybody went, oh, call me by my first name. And
Yeah.
so that was the big struggle. Two is timing for me. If you had a staff meeting that started at 0800, everybody was in place by 0750 or at least 0755. In the civilian world, it's not like that. Meeting starts, hey, we're going to have a meeting at about 8ish. 8:10, people are still walking in.
They're walking
And
in.
and for the first several years, I wanted to stand up and give them knife hands. What the heck are you doing? Sit down. You need to be in place. So forth and so on. Then had to realize wasn't unusual for
Yeah.
that workplace environment, and I was the odd one that had to adapt. It still
At
bothers
that
me at times because, like I tell most people, like I tell my kids all the time, the most important thing that you can give me is your time.
time.
We all make different amounts of money, but we all have the same amount of time in the day. And you chose to spend that time with me, or with someone else. So that needs to be important.
Yeah, the time is very, very important. Yeah, you transition from the state side, you went to the federal side, right? And I really want to talk about this, the VA side of the house, because that's something a lot of veterans going to have to, as far as experience when you transition. You know, and I think it is very, very scary for some folks because they don't understand how to navigate the VA process. As we discussed earlier, you were here on your own account. You're not representing the VA, so I just want to put that out there. We're just going to have some discussion in terms of filing the process and filing the claim. Because when I transitioned, I think a VSO who I was connected with to help me, with my disability claim, and it was
Okay,
not going too
VSO,
well.
Veteran Service Organization,
Organization,
like the
yes,
VAV.
yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, the VA, I think it was VFW guy, whatever. He did the best he could, but I didn't like how he was going, whatever. So I took over myself and I submitted my own claims. That's just me. Some folks may not have the capacity to do it. So I want to just go into the claim process. If you can talk to us about it a little bit more in terms of a new soldier, well, not a new soldier, a person transitioning, submitting claims for the first time, how does the process work when I come in or whoever is assisting me? Because we don't see what happened in the background, whatever the case may be. We see the VA is moving too slow. They have to hurry up because I was there and I saw how the process worked. But, what is the process in terms of when I submit my claim for the first time and what does the process go through and about how much time does it take for my claims to come back in terms of adjudicated and with some results?
So the claims take a couple months, depending on how and when you file it. So a couple different ways. I would recommend anybody, if you're still in service and you're within that 6 month to 3 months of separation, do what's called a BDD claim, benefits delivery at discharge. Your claims take priority in that transition piece. The ideal is, at separation or soon after, we should have a determination made and that moves you forward. Not everybody can do that based off of timing or wherever their situation may be. So whenever you do start that claim process by initiating those forms, kind of do a little research. It's a lot of great resources out there. Google, va.gov, Reddit, done it, a couple different things. But the way the process goes, once that claim is established, comes into the VA, they get it established in the system. They'll review that information and do what they call development, figuring out what they need to do. Do we need to order exams? Do we need military records? Rick said he has PTSD because he was in the explosion here. So they'll have to request those records to ensure Rick was there at that time and place. So that takes a little bit of time, and that's that development piece. Once all of that's done and you get those exams, they compare those exams to your military service treatment records. So while you were in service, did you go to the doctor? Did you go to sick call? Did you go to the cash? And way too often, especially career service members, they don't. They don't tend to take care of themselves. Hey, you're in the
Mhm.
office, you got this done. I need to get these guys out to PT. Or if I go to the doctor, all they're going to do is give me Motrin. So you buy Motrin and pop aspirin. But you need to have it documented. You know, just like if I came to you and said, hey, Sergeant Major, I got this dirtbag soldier, private name Rick. He's a dirtbag. He's always late for work. He doesn't know his job. He talks back. I need him gone. You'll say, okay, where's the paperwork?
Paperwork.
And if
Yeah.
I say, hey, I don't have any, you're probably going to tell me you got a dirtbag soldier named Rick. But if the paperwork's in order, you can begin that process. Same thing with the VA claims process. Need that documentation to show it happened. Not to say the VA doesn't believe you, but we're looking for things that happen while in service to ensure it happened, or worsened, aggravated in service. All right. So that documentation shows that it happened, when it happened, and is it chronic? Spraining your ankle one time at flag football probably is not going to get you a disability for lifelong. But, you as a paratrooper got hung up in a tree, hurt your back, that's going to probably give you some long lasting issues or contentions to deal with. So that's the biggest piece. A lot of folks, you need to put in the time to file your claim properly. Identifying what the issues are. So a lot of folks want to say, well, I hurt my knee. Okay, we don't expect you to be the doctor, but if you truly have a disability, you probably went to the doctor a couple times, and the doctor identified it. You got patella tendon syndrome, you have a meniscus tear, you got a stretched ACL, or whatever the case may be. So kind of be specific as best you can at what the doctor called it, and not what you think it is. Uh, those are the big ones. A lot of people feel that the VA is out to deny you and deny benefits. That's not the case. The VA is fair. They're pretty fair. So
Yeah.
uh, tie goes to the runner. So if there's a doubt, it's probably going to rule, if it's close, it's going to rule in the veteran's favor. Yeah. But it's
Yeah.
just having that
Mm.
documentation.
Thanks a lot
Uh,
for sharing that, Ray, because like I said, some folks don't understand the process. It's that preconceived notion, right, where you hear someone who had a negative interaction with the VA, all of a sudden everybody had a negative interaction. Because my experience with the VA was pretty positive. As I said, when I submitted my claim, I received the documentation back. I knew exactly what to submit and what not to submit. And sometimes I think veterans just have to take the time and educate yourself on the process sometimes. You have to be in charge of the process. Of course, there are different methods in terms of filing your claim. I mean, you can expand on this in terms of who you want to use, or you can do it yourself, or the BDD process. But you have to be involved. And as you stated, the key here is, when I was coming up in the second airborne division, going to sick hall was like, you going to sick hall? Really? We have to skip that mindset, right? If something's wrong with you, go get it checked, go get it annotated. That's what it comes down to. Just another question here. I submit my claim, for example, and it comes back and it's overall denied. The VA say, hey, non-service connected. We can help you. Well, no, we can help you, but non-service connected or not. What's the steps? Because sometimes when folks receive that denial letter, the complete, it's not fair. What are some steps that he or she can take really to appeal that decisions?
the first couple are 995, which is a supplemental claim, adding additional information that wasn't previously reviewed. That would be one. The other one would be a higher level review, 996. And that's reviewing everything that's currently in file, not adding any additional information. So a different reviewer, a higher level, will review that information and make a decision based on what's in file. The other one would be a 10182, which is a Board of Veterans Appeal. That's saying, hey, I have no faith in the VA. I wanted to go to a law judge for them to review it and make a decision. So with those, there are a lot of misconceptions. A lot of folks think, hey, whatever is in my record, I want a higher level review. Rick missed it. But the VA will tell you why we made that decision. A lot of times you hear veterans say, hey, I got back issues. I went to the exam and I was in and out in 2 minutes. They made me take off my shoes and I had no idea why they did that. The reason why they did that, as you kind of think through it, were you sitting in the seat? Yeah, I was sitting in the seat. How was you sitting? Were you sitting upright? Yeah, I was sitting in an upright, military posture. So your body was bent, at 90 degrees. So doc told you come in and have a seat. When you struggled to get on the table, you barely moved your back. Then as the doc's going through notes, asking you questions, you're getting a little upset because they're not really looking at you. And they're going through the notes and asking you a couple different things. Then they ask you to take off your shoes. Now you're really upset. I ain't in here for my feet. I'm in here for my back. So service members or veterans bend over and hastily take off their shoes. The doctor's observing all of this. Now he says, okay, that's fine. Okay, you're here for your back. Bend forward as far as you can till it hurts. Bend back side to side. And veterans are barely able to move. 2 minutes ago, you bent completely over and took off your shoes. 5 minutes ago, you were sitting out there in the chair at a 90-degree angle. And so it's understanding that piece. The doctors aren't stupid. They're not trying to trick you, but,
Yeah.
you need to be open and honest. Um, so that's a big portion of what they're looking at. Now, back to the appeals process. So if that's in your folder and that's what the doctor wrote, now looking at higher level review, moving it from Rick to Ron, now Ron's going to review that same information. No information is going to be added. So unless there's a clear and unmistakable error, or like, I'm a football guy, uh, uh, we called the touchdown on the field, you threw the challenge flag, unless it's certain clearly to overturn it, it's going to stay. That's usually how it goes with higher level reviews.
Mm.
Supplemental offers some additional information that allows you to say, hey, uh, they reviewed the record, but they missed this from my private doctor, or they didn't have this. And it allows you to submit that additional information, something new and material or relevant, that's something that they hadn't seen before that can sway in your favor. So that's the supplemental piece. The other piece is the Board of Veterans Appeals. Most people think, the judge is this grand power that can say, hey, the back, this is right, this is wrong. The judge is looking to make sure the processes were followed correctly. Did they follow all the information available? The 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 judge isn't a doctor, but if there's something glaring, he will send it back to have another exam done. A remand, asking them, hey, relook at these different things. We think you missed this in the process. So those are the 3 steps. But the VA, again, if it's close, it's usually ruled in the veteran's favor.
Thanks for sharing that, Rick. My experience with the VA has been pretty positive, right? As you stated, most of the folks who work in the VA are, prior service members, and we have some outstanding as far as DoD civilians that work in the VA that try to make sure to provide the best service, really, for veterans. And sometimes, as veterans, sometimes you have to be humble,
Correct.
because I've seen in the past where, some level of entitlement. I serve my country, I deserve X, Y, Z. Yeah, we got it, but they have to go according to what the policy says and what is in your medical record. If
Correct.
that's the case, everybody will be 100%, right? So as you stated, you have to be very, very honest with yourself, because the system is not there to corrupt or misuse anybody. The system is pretty fair, but it's up to you really to say, hey, this is what's happening to me. My medical record can prove it. But there are times where sometimes we don't go to sick call. But as you said, right, as time progresses, those injury, can come up again. That's the reason why prior to you transitioning, you do that entire as far as examination to determine your medical stance. So in terms of just the benefit, if you can discuss the benefit side just a little bit for me, I really appreciate you. Some folks don't understand when it comes to benefit, right? You file your claim, it comes back, you 30%, about 30% permanent total, the whole 9 year. What's the difference between those percentage? Because sometimes it get pretty confusing, right? I'm 30%, I'm 40%, I'm 100%. In terms of the percentage, what higher man in terms of compensation that comes along with it?
So based off of those different ratings, as you stated, the VA rates in increments of 10, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, all the way to 100%, which is completely full. All right. So based off of those ratings uh, that come back, they calculate that. So let's say, for instance, you get 10% for hearing loss, you get 50% for sleep apnea, and you get another 50% for something else. Most people do the math and say, hey, that's 110%. I should be there. No, the VA uses the whole person concept. So if you look at a glass and you fill that glass with the first highest number, that 50%, that'll be half full. So half full, half empty, half able, half disabled. So that next percentage comes off of what's able or that empty space. So if you put another 50% of what's remaining, that would take you to 75% because half of that remaining 50. And then the last number and so forth and so on. So that 110 that we added up really comes out to be 80%. And people have a problem with that. The VA uses a table that makes it a little easier. So you can pull up the table, you can Google it, and it show you how to go across to those numbers and figure out the exact number you are. So the VA rounds to the nearest tenth. So if you're at 80% rating, could be anywhere from 75% to 84%. And a lot of folks don't understand that. And they'll say, hey, I got an 80. All I need is another 20%. I got 20% increase on my hearing loss, and I remained at 80. Why? The VA's crazy. No, it's understanding that process. Before you go play a sport, you do the research, to figure out what's going on. Everybody can see someone play basketball and say, I can do that. But then you
Yeah.
go out and do it, and the ref's calling you for 3 seconds in the paint, double dribble, carry. So it's understanding the rules. And I'll tell everybody, do your research, find out what the rules are so you know how to properly apply yourself.
Thanks for
Uh,
clarifying that. I really
you said,
appreciate you. Yeah, I really appreciate you clarifying that, because sometimes it can get pretty confusing. Sometimes folks don't want to take the time, and sometimes the language can be very, very confusing, right? Because sometimes be the man don't understand exactly what they're talking about. But I mean, the VA have a number you can call in different places, to ask those questions. In terms of the benefit piece, at what percentage can a veteran add his or her dependent? And if you can just clarify what is considered dependent. I mean, can I put my grandpa on there? I mean, can I put who is considered my over dependent, and at what level can I don't want to use the term claim, but add them as far as on my awards?
All right. To be able to add a dependent, you have to be at least 30%. 30% or
Percent.
higher
Okay.
to add dependents. The way the VA defines dependents are minor children, whether your children, your stepchildren, adopted children, or what they call school age. School age children are children ages 18 to 23 that are attending school, higher learning. All right, so that'll qualify most of the children, with the exception of helpless child. Helpless child is a child that becomes incapable of self-support prior to the age of 18, as determined by a doctor. You can use IEP, individual education plan, things of that nature, showing that, and you can keep them on your ward throughout the rest of their lives that way. Spouses are considered dependents. So your spouse, as long as you're legally married, in the state of South Carolina, we no longer recognize common law marriage, because folks would say, "Hey, well, we've been together 30 years, and this is my spouse." Well, uh, you would have to file stating that
Get that
that was your
paperwork.
common
Get
law.
the paperwork in.
That paperwork trail, you would have to do that, have that done prior. So spouses can be added as dependents. Parents can be added as dependents if you're maintaining a certain percentage of their support. It even goes as much as the grandparents. So if you were raised by your grandparents and you're contributing to their support, you can add them as a dependent. Uh, the thing gets a little tricky. You can't have your mama on there and her mama and your granddad as well. They
Yeah.
look at it as that person that was responsible for your upbringing prior to age 18. Who was that principal person raising you, or people? Yeah. So parents
That's
are
amazing. I didn't know that. That's amazing. That's good information. That's really good information. And one benefit that we don't talk about until it's too late is I think the VA referred to as death benefit, right? Because we all have to transition someday.
right.
And it is a very, I don't want to use the term sensitive conversation or topic, but we just don't talk about it. What are some things, in terms of, when a veteran passed away, and what are some benefits out there, if he or she was receiving some kind of compensation? How does that process work anyway? I mean, what can, a veteran's married, he passed away, she passed away, what can a spouse do in terms of to get some of those remaining benefit from the spouse I was getting?
All right. A lot of veterans want first, we're all going to transition. Uh,
Yeah.
it's inevitable. So we need to plan accordingly. So prior to, get your affairs in order. Let your family members know, hey, I did serve. Here's my DD 214. Here's the paperwork that may be needed. One, and get them prepared for it. Because as they're going through that state of mourning, they're not thinking about this, and they're frustrated, and they're trying to get everything else in order first. Secondly, like you stated, there's a couple different types of benefits. A lot of times we say, hey, when I die, the VA is going to take care of me. That's not necessarily the case. So the VA, as far as burial benefits, two different ways they look at it: service connected and not service connected. If your death is a result of a service-connected disability, that's roughly $2,000. It can be a couple dollars more based off of transportation costs. If it's not service-connected, meaning the service didn't cause it, it's roughly $250, which is the same as Social Security. So that's the burial benefits. Uh, Members who served honorably are entitled to honor guard coming out and doing the military funerals, as far as presentation of the flag, certificate, presidential memorial certificates, being buried at a national cemetery. The opening and closing, the gravesite itself is free. The family's still responsible for funeral, memorial ceremonies, flowers, anything else that may entail. But that's a big benefit. Uh, I'm from Chicago. Some of my cemeteries aren't the best maintained. So a national cemetery, let's say for instance Fort Jackson, always well maintained, is always cut, is always flowers and flags. So that's a big benefit for a lot of folks. Um, Outside of burial, you have survivor's benefits. One is called DIC, Dependent Indemnity Compensation. The other one is pension, income based. DIC, Dependent Indemnity Compensation, is saying, hey, uh, Johnny was in the service and he had these disabilities, we cause hypertension, we cause diabetes. If he was to succumb to one of those disabilities, his cause of death or contributing factor, we would pay that surviving spouse whatever that amount is at the time. Roughly right now, it's about $1,700.
A
There's a
month.
couple other considerations a month. There's a couple other
Okay.
considerations, such as, if you were married more than 8 to 10 years and so forth, it's a couple dollars more. But in general, $1,700. A lot of folks say, hey, that's not a lot of money. How can you live off of that? We just lost Johnny. He was getting a retirement check, a disability check, and his income, that household income, is drastically reduced. But think about this. If you work for Amazon or Google or, Cadillac or whoever, typically when you pass, what does the family get? Goose egg in
Some
most
roses,
instances.
nothing. Yeah. Some
Yeah.
cards or something.
Yeah. Johnny was a great guy. When he worked with us, we'll miss him. So the VA is not there to take care of you to that extent. But based off of what that person's service may have contributed to their death is to help supplement or augment that, if you will.
I
So
appreciate you,
that's
Rick.
that piece.
Thanks for sharing that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a
Then
lot.
the
Some folks
next
just
one,
don't understand the process. Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead. Go
yeah,
ahead, Rick.
yeah. Then the next one is pension, survivor's pension. A
Okay.
lot of people say, hey, well, he served the service, he was getting this check for a number of years. Survivor's pension is income based. Survivor's pension means, hey, they would have had to serve during the time of war at least one day. Uh, they would have to have an honorable discharge, and their income would have to be below a certain level. So, based off of the loss of that veteran, if the surviving spouse meets those requirements, she may be eligible for pension if her income drops below that level. So, the VA will pay them to get them above that level, which is set by Social Security.
Okay. And that's a state by state basis, right? Because every state is different in terms of what that threshold is, right?
Correct.
Okay. I appreciate you, brother. As we wrap up here, man. I know we spent a lot of time discussing the VA piece. I mean, that's a very, very critical area in terms of how when you transition, and that's a fear. Believe it or not, a lot of folks that because when I was going through the process myself initially, I was like, oh man, this is kind of difficult. But once you do some research, talk to folks, a lot of organizations out there can help veterans, to file your claim and answer your questions. I mean, the VA has a VA hotline you can call and talk to folks, during the day to answer those questions. What are some advice in terms of the claim process and benefits from the VA where you can share with folks that are currently serving and say, hey man, as you serving, I know you currently have no plan to transition, but I recommend you start doing these this and this to set you up for success as you transition to make sure that your medical side is taken care of.
Yeah. Go to the doctor. If you got an injury, something's going on chronically, go to the doctor, at least get it documented. I'm not saying be a malingerer. I'm not saying
Yeah.
be a sick call ranger, because we all got jobs to do. But you need to have that documentation trail, one. Two, do a little research. Hey, when we go to war, we get an op order, we get an execution order, we get a prep order. Be prepared. Take those steps to prepare for that transition, even if it's last minute. Now start doing that research. What disabilities do I have? Start from your head and go all the way down to your toe. Because a lot of things that we don't truly think about that the service or the VA compensates you for. For a lot of folks, shaving. If you got pseudofolliculitis, Barbe, the shaving bumps, you can be compensated for that. Hypertension. A lot of folks say, hey, well, the service calls you. A lot of folks that say, no, it didn't. It may have, based off of your diet, may have caused it. But if it's documented while in service, it's caused by service. So take those steps to get that done. You talked about one of the organizations, the VFW, Veterans of Foreign Wars. Most folks think about the VFW down on Main Street. That's where the parties
Mhm.
are and cheap drinks. Those organizations are designed to assist service members and veterans with filing their claim.
Yeah.
That was the main reason for them to being established, to fight for those benefits. So they can assist you free of charge in helping you file those claims. Uh, Keep in mind, a lot of those folks are like doctors, lawyers. Some are better than others, you know. So talk around, get a feel for that person, what they know, what their knowledge level is, and work with whoever feels comfortable with you. But it's always good to kind of seek advice, even if you don't decide not to go with one of them. At least talk and have a conversation. There's a lot of disabilities again that most people don't think of, so those folks can normally point you in the right direction. But that's roughly about it. That's all I can think of offhand.
I appreciate you, brother. I got to bring you back on the show, man, to talk more about this whole VA process, because that's one area a lot of folks are pretty concerned about, folks that I talk to, in terms of, they're not thinking about it now, but sooner or later it's going to come up. I do believe the better you learn about it, the better it is for you to posture yourself to transition. And the information is out there. The VA.gov, you go on the website, everything's on there available to you to look at it and determine, what's going on. And sometimes if it's confusing, get in contact with somebody, one of those organizations out there can assist you answer those questions.
Yeah.
So I just want to say I appreciate you, brother. As always, I appreciate you, man. As we wrapped up here, do you have anything else to add? Any closing comments?
Uh, Nothing. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to come out and speak to you. It's been a pleasure, as always, Sam. Sarah, if there's ever anything that I can do to assist you, just let me know.
Same here, brother. I appreciate you.